I'm Dean. I've interviewed hundreds of PMs, engineers, designers, and researchers at this point. I also have a startup. You should download our app. Go ahead and find me on LinkedIn. So today we're going to talk about asking why, and specifically about acing your product manager interview. But really, most important thing here is to ask why. Not sure if we have Coke fans or Pepsi fans, but did you know that there are 39 grams of sugar per 12-ounce can of soda? Actually, this might be a slide from one of my health coaching presentation decks, not the interview prep one. So actually, soda machine is a common interview question that I often ask candidates. I ask them to design me a soda machine. And this task is intentionally vague. It is demonstrative of the kind of asks that you'll often get from an executive. The ask states a vague what, but not the why, not the who, and not the how. It lacks substance. And so the first thing that you might think to do when given a task like this is solve the task, right? How about we build an app where it notifies you every time there's a soda machine nearby? Or perhaps we build a robot keg on wheels that goes ahead and distributes soda to anybody in the office. Or maybe we take Elon Musk's humanoid robot and have it pour soda for you. Now, at this point, you've come up with 3 separate solutions for the vague task design a soda machine. We don't know why. We don't know if we need to solve diabetes. We don't know if we're building for a small niche community of blind people. And we have no idea whether or not we're meant to do it in 4 months without any software engineers or hardware engineers. Each of these inputs change things, change your solution. You need to capture the problem, the need, and the objective. However creative your solution is, if the information about the problems and ultimately what solution you have wasn't clear, you'd have built the wrong thing and you'd have failed this particular interview task. To make it simpler, you should have asked why. Take a problem. The floor is wet. If you get a problem like this, what is the need? Well, the need is you need a mop, right? The objective, keep the floor dry. So you have to capture all of this information in an interview, the problem, the need, and the objective, and asking why really does help. Sometimes people don't dig in enough is the key here, and asking why is important. Let's assume that the floor is wet. We might think of a solution. The floor is wet, go ahead and mop it up. However, you might ask the question, why? Why is the floor wet? Well, the pipe might be leaking. If the pipe is leaking, you might say, oh, all right, we'll go ahead and fix the pipe. Now, if you were to ask why once more, you might find out actually there's too much pressure in the pipe. Okay, great solution. Go ahead and lower the pressure. Well, why is there too much pressure? Could be that the regulator is busted. The regulator is busted. Go ahead and replace the regulator, right? Well, why is the regulator busted? It could be a maintenance scheduling issue. And so you went from the floor is wet to you need more frequent inspections. Very, very different solutions. This is what goes into being a product manager and asking this question why over and over and over again to try to understand the root problem and then ultimately provide a solution that is relevant to that problem. This type of interview question is what we call the design interview question. We're going to focus primarily on this first row. The second row, which I'll provide some resources for, we're not going to focus as much today. It's also less common for newer product management roles. Even the marketing and systems interview questions are more common for product marketing or project marketing manager roles, as well as technical program manager roles, which are a bit different. On the design side, we need to understand what the problem is that we're solving, learn the problem. We understand why we're building this to understand the need. We need to understand who's it for, and begin to form that objective that we would have around the solution. What are the needs? You might ask what's on the market today, who the stakeholders are, what are the constraints cost-wise or people-wise, what metrics would you consider? These sort of questions ahead of time are really important to address. And one thing to keep in mind, the interviewer here is your teammate. You need to think of them as your teammate. Oftentimes I'll interview someone and they'll talk at you, almost like I'm doing now, for the better part of a 10-minute exercise. And you need to validate understanding. You need to understand what the interview is looking for and ask all sorts of questions as the exercise is going on. So when someone says design a soda machine, you say, hey, What's the problem we're solving? And they might answer it vaguely. You say, well, do we want to solve for this or do we want to solve for this? Begin to validate your assumptions. And that's very important to do collaboratively, since, of course, in your day job, you'll also be collaborative. When you're done validating these problems, you're going to go ahead and propose a solution, like I did prematurely earlier. The solution itself is more than just the idea that you have that you're going to implement. It's also defining the metrics, stating your concerns and trade-offs. The concerns and trade-offs and the questioning of your solution is almost as important as the solution itself. You want to think about challenging your beliefs. And so even at the end of the exercise, you might say, and if I were to do this over again, I would do X, Y, or Z. And so that kind of challenging the status quo culture is something that we'll look for. And the last thing that you want to do with the solution, as I mentioned earlier, is you'll ask for feedback from your teammate, from the interviewer. I'm running through the foundation of a design interview here. If you're confused, go ahead and read a book. Highly recommend Gail Lackman book. Now we're going to jump into the next part, which is the wonderful question, tell me about yourself. Really, the key to product management is to get comfortable communicating, also get comfortable talking about yourself. Your ideas, your vision is going to be something that you need to get your entire team behind. When someone says, tell me about yourself, this is an opportunity for you to get comfortable with them and then for them to begin to understand you. It's very important to be concise, giving a lot of information clearly and in a few words. So brief, but comprehensive. I would record yourself in a mirror for 2 minutes or less and really practice. This is as much of an opportunity for you to share about yourself, about what you're looking for in a job, as it is for them to judge and understand you as a candidate. Okay, interviewer might ask, tell me about yourself. At this point, you should assume that the interviewer has your resume open and is going to be skimming it while you answer. You do not have their undivided attention. The longer you speak, the more opportunity for misinterpretation. And so you want to pick 4 things. It's important that you assess the company with those 4 things. For example, items 3 and 4 are things that I would look for in a business. I want to make sure that my role is design-oriented, that my role has a wide-spanning impact. 2 out of the 4 things should be oriented around what you're looking for in your next role. The first 2 things are things that I want them to understand about me. I'm technical and I have a startup acumen. PM is interdisciplinary work. So you can't be good at data design, engineering, research, and marketing. Pick the things that you think you're strong at and double down on those strengths. Don't focus as much on the weaknesses. Use short, succinct sentences. Don't use big words or concepts that interviewers won't understand. Interviewers most likely won't understand your industry. So state it shortly and also succinctly. And then go ahead and clarify your understanding. So ask the question, did that answer your question? Or would you like me to dig into anything a bit more? Oftentimes at the beginning of the interview, I'll create a social contract. I'll say something like, since we only have a short time together, I'm going to go ahead and be brief with my answers. But if you'd like me to go into any additional details, I'd be happy to. Does that sound good to you? With that, you've developed a contract with the person that, in fact, you're going to try to focus on brevity, and you're encouraging them to ask more questions where relevant. We're going to jump into behavioral. And so behavioral is actually the easiest of the 3. It's entirely formulaic. And really, we use this acronym called STAR. Highlight the situation in detail, then go ahead and define the tasks and the actions. You're stating what you did to solve the problem at hand. The next would be the results. What was the outcome of your actions? Was there a resolution or not? Was there a contingency? And then the final part is this self-reflection, which you talked earlier about, the mindset of coming back and saying, by the way, if I were to do that differently, I might reach out to the manager sooner, or I might solve this problem in a different way. And we've got Sam Fernandez on the line here. We're going to jump into an interview question. Sam is going to be the mock candidate, and I'm going to be the mock interviewer. Tell me about style question is very, very common. Could be, tell me about a time when you encountered a conflict with a coworker. Tell me about a time when there were vague requirements and you had to draw alignment across the team. Sam, thanks for joining the call. Great to meet you. Let's get started the interview. We're actually going to show you some of the key questions that you should be thinking about in an interview while Sam goes ahead and answers the question. Sam, tell me about a time when you encountered a conflict with a coworker.
Sure. So At the time, me and a developer on the team were working on a feature where we needed to set up an experiment and meet a tight deadline. Knowing this, my main function was to be proactive about the meetings with this developer often, to sign off on requirements and close any knowledge gaps as early as possible. Weeks passed and I noticed that the deadline was at risk because development was running into significant delays. I took notice and decided to approach my developer directly and openly, asking them what is going on. Is there something wrong? Are you 100% plugged in for this feature? Then they actually ended up telling me that they had broken their knee recently, which made it difficult to walk and run, resulting in their sadness. I reassured my developer that no feature is more important than your health, obviously, and it's okay to ask for help when needed. I took action by creating a game plan with my developer and their manager, which would have other developers hop on in case they had needed to take time off. This ultimately resulted in us meeting the deadline in a timely manner. In hindsight, my developer wouldn't ask questions during our first meetings, and now I know that I need to press on more in the early phases of development to ensure we're meeting milestones.
Was there anyone who you worked with who helped you with this situation and resolve the situation further?
I actually had a peer of mine help me out, someone who was more experienced when it came to like conflict resolution help me. Sometimes there's ways to resolve these things. We don't need to get stressed out about the deadlines because there's always a way in software development to find a fix. I just made sure to have someone else on the team work on the feature if my developer couldn't do it.
Oftentimes the types of questions that an interviewer will respond would be things that Sam missed in this STAR tactic. The reflection portion that she did at the end where she said, if I were to do this sooner, I would have pushed a bit harder. If she had missed that component, I probably as an interviewer would have said, well, if you had to do it all over again, how would you have changed your approach? And actually maybe would have suggested even more at the beginning to understand the clear situation at hand. You highlighted the tight deadline, the way that you approach the developer, but it is good to give a sense as we were building a product that was on Microsoft's cloud and meant to accomplish X, Y, or Z. A little bit about the situation so that the interviewer can really picture it in their mind and get focused on you, can help the interviewer to really understand the situation prior to you explaining the conflict at hand. One thing I also think Sam did is she brought the conflict up almost immediately. The worst is when you're done and I have to ask the question, so what was the conflict? And it means that you didn't clearly address the situation. That's a little bit about the behavioral. Thank you, Sam, for being our guinea pig today. One thing that often gets confused, a project manager is not the same as a product manager. Both are distinct roles, and sometimes they're the same person, but they are distinctly different roles. Product management with a D are responsible for building the roadmap, for defining the what and why, and working with developers to determine when. So the what and the why are very much related to a product manager. A project manager defines a sprint plan, helps the developers refine and coordinate what is upcoming, what is near term. Roadmap is associated with outcomes. What do we expect for the business? Whereas the sprint plan is explicitly focused on output. Keep in mind as you're looking for roles, sometimes they will be intermixed in terms of the naming. If you're interested in this talk and the type of work that we do as product managers or sometimes product owners, you definitely want to be looking for those roles more explicitly. And you also have things like program managers, which is an interesting hybrid. What's important is whether or not the role is focused on business outcomes and thinking about the why, or whether the role is focused on coordination of the how and of the actual outputs. And that might help you understand whether or not your skills fit into one versus the other. If you have questions, go ahead and throw them into the chat. Go to this link. The book that I mentioned earlier is on it. A link to this presentation is on it, as well as some additional resources. I do a lot of product management in the user experience space. So you also see a couple of tools like Figma, which I would definitely encourage anybody who's interested in the design space.
Which role is more technical between project management and product management?
This entirely depends on the team. Many teams in big tech are moving away from project managers. A company like a Microsoft or a Facebook, you'll have technical program managers and you'll have product managers. So both need to be technical, but the technical program manager is focused on one particular vertical. Think about Facebook, like the news feed. The product manager is thinking about, how does the news feed interact with the profile? How am I going to be clicking from my news feed to my profile? What are the competitive analyses that I should be considering when thinking about the news feed compared to TikTok or compared to one of our competitors' news feed? Whereas the technical program manager might be thinking about the nuances of the search within the news feed, or might be thinking about one tool that is essential to the news feed working well, but isn't entirely built within the overall picture. Generally, a technical program manager is going to be a bit more depth first, a bit more deep into one area versus a product manager. And project managers are a little bit more coordination based. Generally, I think of a project manager more like a scrum master, someone who's slightly less technical, since they are focused on near-term sprint planning, at least in my experience.
What would you tell people to avoid doing when trying to get a PM role?
When trying to get a PM role, don't be vague and opaque with what your interests are, things that you should do with regards to networking. Be transparent, be upfront with people about what it is you're looking for. I'm working with a designer right now at Microsoft who wants to become a PM. And we meet every few weeks and she tells me about what she's interested in. And we try to find new projects and ways to plug her in, make introductions to other teams, and take a look at these resources, learn about facilitating a workshop, learn about design thinking. You want to make sure that you understand what it takes to be a product manager. Once you understand that, start doing it in whatever role you are, wherever you are. And so if you don't have a job, well, then run a workshop with some friends about a new project that you have in mind and see if you can use this design thinking methodology, where you start with the why, understand the key problems, and then you ultimately build solutions based on those problems. Use those skills that you have to network in the industry so that you're a bit more successful when it comes to the interviewing.
So considering we have a lot of university students who are pursuing IT or CS degrees, and they're unclear of what their career paths will be, which recommendations do you have for deciding what path is right for you? SWE or PM or something else?
Pick what gives you energy. If programming doesn't give you energy, then being a programmer in the long term is going to be really quite difficult for you. If communicating with people and helping people understand bigger visions and aligning them isn't something that brings you energy, being a PM is going to be a tough battle. That being said, the generic answer I would give is be a software engineer. Getting a technical understanding will never hurt you. It will only ever help you. The best PMs are the technical ones, are the ones that understand what an API is and how inheritance and polymorphism work. And so if you're getting an IT or CS background and you can double down on that technical acumen in some way, shape, or form, I would definitely encourage you to do so, because otherwise over time, the product skills that you develop are going to be less valuable. You don't understand what it takes to build it. So therefore, the empathy that you build with your development team is going to be lackluster. Julian, I know you're in this space as well. Do you have an opinion on the matter?
I completely agree with you. You have to build empathy, and being a PM and knowing how long an OKR takes. This can be done in 2 weeks, but you realistically know it's going to be a 3 or 4 plus week thing. From that, when you move from dev to PM, I feel like you would have a better understanding of stuff. And I have had a few folks within UP actually that moved from PM to SWE and SWE to PM. So
SWE is software engineer. For those who don't know, building empathy is something that we use in technology about understanding another person's perspective and where they're coming from. OKRs, so objectives and key results, another measurement tactic that we use in the tech space in order to try to define and see whether or not we've met our goals. And so, yeah, the more time you spend in the shoes of your engineers, your designers, your researchers, the more you can understand when they come back to you and they say, hey, it's not done yet. You're not frustrated. You say, I understand. You've been working on X, Y, or Z. I've been there, done that to some extent, and therefore I can empathize with you.
Absolutely. And this next question is really good. So advice for answering what's your favorite product question.
What's your favorite product? Do a little research on the company. If Google comes to you and says, what's your favorite product? Or if Apple comes to you and says your favorite product, if you have an honest, authentic favorite product at that business, definitely state it, definitely share it. One thing I will say though, is if you don't have a favorite product or you don't understand their product lineup, don't try. Just pick a product that actually is your favorite product and tell them why. in an honest and authentic way. For me, I care deeply about design, if you remember that slide. If someone asks me what my favorite product is, you could bet that the answer is going to be because of the nuanced design. And for example, I'd probably answer Google Maps. I'd say, I love Google Maps. I especially love the Google Maps product on the web browser. I find that the way that the interface progressively discloses concepts is quite novel. You type in restaurants, you get a list of restaurants, and the map readjusts. Every pixel of the window is dedicated to your query. And the way that they even predict what it is that you're interested in, show you your home address by default, show you what's related by default, really helps you get what you need quickly. And so you can see an answer like that is entirely focused and doubling down on the fact that I have a design background, and is actually forgetting and eliminating the other aspects of my skill set, which, at least for the purposes of this question, aren't a focus of mine.
I like that, the relating your interest. This transitions into this question really really well. I'm a biological science major and I'm interested in project management. What is your advice on breaking into the PM field?
First, if you're interested in biological science, biotech is huge. There's a lot of products in that space. That is an industry expertise. If you can use and you get energy from that expertise, you should double down on it.
That's awesome. Great points. This question talks about your background. What made you go with PM and other aspects of tech? You worked as a software engineer before, and what made you transition?
I joined a startup after college, and I had already built a couple startups before that. Working at a startup versus big tech companies silo you into a specific discipline. In the startup space, I had 6 different business cards. They each said different things. There was a client-facing cloud technology company. Depending on the customer, I would scratch my head and say, do they want software engineer dean? Do they want solution architect dean? A little different, right? Do they want product manager? You are picking up, running, and figuring out whatever to run faster for a given day. I started having the idea that I wanted to get into big tech. And I was like, well, probably product management. I do a lot of sales. I do marketing. I do technical execution. And so I flipped my LinkedIn title to product manager, got new business cards. The benefit of going with the startup is that you wear more hats.
Yeah, so from all these hats in the startup space to being like, I like this hat in the big tech space. Yeah, it's really cool. I definitely understand that startups, you have to be doing a little bit of everything. This is a very specific question. I'm a project manager specialized in the AI/machine learning space. And I find that I get close to 100% artificial intelligence enterprise interviews considering my experience. I have a hard time landing interviews in other domains, especially in consumer space. Any advice? If you're a project manager, it's a very niche industry. How do you transition to being a more general PM in other roles, or just land those interviews?
Does your resume highlight your AI ML skills? What skills would you prefer for your resume to highlight? If you have to remove AI ML from your current position and just call yourself a product manager, don't call yourself an AI ML product manager. That's fair game. I'm assuming that you want to move out of AI ML. Start with your resume, craft what new industry expertise or what new PM discipline you want to shine through.
Yeah, so I'm coming off mute for this one because I want to add one bit there. The bigger issue is moving from enterprise to a consumer product. Such a different user base, and the kinds of expertise that they care about is just really different. And I'm struggling with that, right? Because I don't have that skill set.
I've been mostly in enterprise, so I don't know how much I can answer the question, but I'll try. There are some businesses that are consumer based that are all data driven all day, and data matters in enterprise, but you can just ask your customer and they'll tell you what they want. Yes, the data is helpful, but business consumer, the discipline is harsh around whether a feature makes it out, because you can only have a couple dozen features before your customers start to complain and before your customers start to not understand how your product works. What kind of PM roles are you interviewing for, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, I want to say first, you answered the bulk of my question, so thanks. But I was trying to actually look at Spotify roles because they have some really cool AI tech where I think my technical ability could shine, but I can get some of those more consumer market experiences.
So maybe you would do quite well if you interviewed. The other thing is it sounds like you've had success getting interviews in general. One thing that I definitely have found to be kind of a secret weapon of mine is I'll open up LinkedIn, go to someone's profile who works at that company, or 20 people's profile, because response rate's going to be low. And when you go to invite them to your network, you can customize the message. Just punch in like, I'm interested in moving from an AI ML enterprise role to more consumer role, and I'm looking for your advice. Would you have 15 minutes to chat? ? Most people won't respond, but if you reach out to 20, will 1 respond or 2 respond? I don't work at Spotify. Maybe there's more about their discipline, about the types of resumes that they approve that we're just not seeing.
Super good advice. Thank you so much.
How would one transition from suite to a PM? Would one go back and get an MBA, or are there companies that provide a training program?
That's an interesting question. Talk to your manager, start to interact with your PM. If you're a software engineer and you have a PM, talk to the PM. I'm interested in a little bit more in the product space. I can shadow you in a couple of your meetings. Can I do the competitive analysis? I've been really wanting to get into the PM space. If one of my software engineers asked me if they could do a competitive analysis, I'd be like, yes, absolutely. See if you can help other PMs. Do you need a master's? I believe Elon Musk said something along the lines of he prefers to hire people at University of Michigan who have a bachelor's than at Harvard with a master's. I thought that was an interesting statement. Udemy, UDEMY, or Pluralsight, Pluralsight, both really, really great resources. You can find a $10 course in product management on Udemy. Just do it. Spend the $10, even if you never end up getting around to doing it. Look for the one that has 50,000 reviews. And I would say the same if you're trying to go from PM to being a software engineer. Pick one language, learn it really, really well, and then build something with it. This is just like a discipline like any other. In that Go link that I sent earlier, there is a certification, which looks okay on a resume. If you're more of a structured learner, I think they're like $600 or $700. It's cheaper than a master's program. It might be a good place to start.
Our last question. What are the assumptions people might have around the project management role that are not true?
Assumptions around product management that aren't true. You're like the mini CEO of a business. I've heard that one a lot. You have a specific area of expertise. It's not like you're going to go make changes to the entire business. For example, we have an entirely different marketing team, entirely different team that does pricing for products. Over time, the growth path, being a product manager to being a senior product manager or a principal product manager, and then you get people underneath you, more product managers, and then you become a partner and you get principals and seniors below you. And there's a bit of a congestion by profession thing that exists in the big tech space. It doesn't exist as much in startup land. Also, the project versus product management is a common confusion. People think, oh, project manager, same thing. And there is definitely a distinction in the industry.
How different is project management on the software field from the hardware field?
Disclaimer, my hardware experience is only in sensor technology. I have built the largest printer company in the United States is in every big box retail store, and they have lots of these little scanners that print labels, and they're all interlaced together, and then they send telemetry, they send data up to the cloud. And so I built a whole system around aggregating that data and sending it. I also did a smart motorhome project, which was quite fun. So you could predict when things are going wrong with the vehicle. It's not figuring out how a hardware team designs a microprocessor so that your AirPods work properly. I don't have experience with that. So in my experience, though, limited as it may be, the tools and tactics you need as a product manager are very similar. If you have a deep hardware expertise and you're looking to get into the software space or vice versa, you'll have to do some finagling and manipulating your current role so that it's perceived as a bit more on the opposite side for you to get that job.